So, welcome to one of the most least interesting lore videos on Game of Thrones that you may ever watch. It's about feudalism. Well, the Westerosian government, but they're basically the same thing. Now, I wanted to do this video because I understand that a lot of people may understand what's going on in Game of Thrones, who's in control, and there's all the kings and they're all fighting. But I want to explain what the Westerosian government really is, how it's structured, and kind of what feudalism is. So, if you're interested by that, stay tuned. So, to start off with, Westeros is what you'd call a feudal hereditary monarchy, which basically means there's a nice pyramidish sort of shape to the class systems of Westeros, and the roles of this class station can be inherited from family member or basically just connections. It was actually the Andals who brought the feudal system to Westeros during their invasion. Before this, the First Men were basically just a bunch of tribes, and there was other stuff going around, like the Children of the Forest, but we won't go into that this episode. So, if you're confused with what the feudal system is, basically you need to imagine it kind of like a pyramid, with the high class on the top, but it's a thin slice. There's not many people up there, and as it goes down, the lower class you get, the more people there are. So, the lower classes are going to have a lot more people, and the high class less people. It's kind of an easy way of thinking about it. So, let's start with the pinnacle of the pyramid, the king. Now, the king is a hereditary role passed on from father to son and is usually kept within one family. Now, it's always is pretty much passed on from male to male, unless there's no male heirs, in which case it can be passed on to a woman. Now, in case of Robert Baratheon, he wasn't actually the king. He is a usurper, which basically means he usurped or dethroned the past king in the civil war in Westeros. And basically he claimed the crown through rights of conquest, making him the king. Now the king is obviously meant to be in undisputed control, meant to have taxes, wealth. He can declare war on other nations if he really wanted to. He's in charge of the entire kingdom. But what some people may be wondering is, what about in the War of Five Kings? There were 5 kings, and, well, the people in Essos and the rest of the world, who would they see as the actual king of Westeros? Well, in Westeros, whoever's sitting on the Iron Throne is officially the king. So, whoever's sitting on that throne to the rest of the world will be seen as the actual official king. That's one of the main reasons why Stannis attacked King's Landing, because to the rest of the world he was just someone claiming to be king. And until he's sitting on the Iron Throne, the rest of the world, so Essos, anywhere else, they're not going to identify him as the king of Westeros. For this reason, technically, in the War of Five Kings, everyone else saw Joffrey, yep, him, as the king of Westeros. Now, think of the Iron Throne as kind of like the crown jewels. It's the one thing. It's in the capital city. Whoever's sitting on it is in control. Now, Westeros is a big place. And how does one man rule it all? Well, he uses lords. Now, whilst the king is, quotation, eating and whoring his way into an early grave, end of quotation, the lords rule the land in his stead. They basically control a section of the kingdom and rule it in the king's name. Now, there are 7 of these lords to represent each one of the 7 kingdoms, and that's kind of what Westeros is split up into. Now, this is called the 7 Kingdoms because when the Targaryens came and conquered, each one of the 7 kingdoms was ruled by their own king. So there was a king of the north who was a Stark, there was a king of the west who was the Lannister. The Tyrells and the Baratheons weren't actually these great houses at this point. But yeah, you get the picture. So the lord position is also hereditary, so it'll be passed on from family member to family member, the same kind of thing as the king. Basically, they sit quite happily up there, living honourable lives, and get rich in the process. They rule the kingdom, and in return they get the honour, the gold, and the glory, so it's quite a good deal. But wait, there's way more than 7 lords. House Mormont, House Cray, House Glover, House Bolton, House Reed, House Horton, House Karstark, House Umber, and they're just the northern ones, and not even all of them. Well, basically, these are what I'm going to call sub-lords. Now, in the same way that the king outsources all of his jobs to his 7 lords, these 7 lords don't really want to have to do all the work themselves, and why would they have to? Because it's still a lot of land that they have to maintain control of. So what they do is they then go and outsource their work to smaller houses, and these sub-lords do it. Now, it tends to be that these sub-lords are somehow related to the main lord families, or have served them very, very faithfully in the past. Now these lords, they're getting a pretty good deal. They're getting lands, nobility, money. Basically, they're getting the same deal that the other lords get from the king, but on a slightly smaller scale. Now you might be starting to see a nice little pyramid shape forming here, with the one king on top, the 7 lords under him, and the hundreds of sublords under that. Now what comes after the sublords though? Well, it would be the knights and the other nobles. Okay, when I say knights, that's quite a broad category. Knights do come under this class quite a lot of the time, but a vassal's basically somebody who's given wealth and land in exchange for pledging loyalty to the lord. Now this doesn't just mean, oh, I pledge your loyalty. It means you've done something good for that lord, you've been heroic, you've fought in a battle, you've brought them victory, you've protected against some hill tribes. Basically, you'll be given a little keep somewhere, and people will see that, you know, you're quite a good person. Now, this doesn't only mean that you have to go and be some sort of warrior or knight to be a vassal. People who are related to some of the great houses, such as the Lannisters, they could be seen as a vassal because, of course, they're not going to be poor. They'll still have a decent amount of wealth, but they don't have as much political power as the lords or the sublords, so they're kind of still rich, but they don't have much sway in the political system. Now, what's next? Oh yes, the peasants. Now, there's a lot more peasants in Westeros, but you probably wouldn't call them peasants. They're more like small folk. Pretty condescending name, I know. So, what do the small folk do? Well, they basically are peasants. In exchange for protection from the lord, or the vassal, or the sublord, they are given a piece of land to maintain. Now, this is not their land, it still belongs to the lord. Basically, that family will then be allowed to keep a small amount of what they earn or create from that, such as the crop, and in exchange the rest of it goes to the lord to make money out of. Now, the peasants do kind of need this because in Westeros there's a lot of threats going round, like hill tribes, wildlings, shadowcats, mountain lions, and even direwolves if you live really far up north. But yeah, you can kind of see why a lot of people would be okay with doing a bit of manual labour in exchange for protection. No easy way of saying this, but being a small folk really does tend to suck. Not only do you not own the land or get to keep most of the stuff that you create or make or, well, sell, basically you're also pledging to fight for the lord. So all of those soldiers you see in Game of Thrones, they're just small folk who've pledged loyalty to a lord. Yeah, it really does suck to be a small folk. Obviously, there's more small folk than anyone else, so you can see that there is that nice pyramid shape. So yeah, that's about it. There's lots of other orders kind of spewing out of this pyramid, such as the Small Council or the Maesters, but we'll get to them another time. The big problem with the feudal system is that it's incredibly difficult to, as I would say, rank up. So basically the lords may one day become the king if, well, they will launch a rebellion, or if they're somehow married into that family. And the sublords could potentially become the lords, if you're House Bolton anyway. And, well, the vassals could possibly one day become subhouses, but if you're one of the small folk, there's pretty much no way in hell you're ever going to move anywhere up that ladder. Potentially you could become a vassal, but the chances of that are so slim that I wouldn't be betting on it. So that's Westeros' governing feudal system. Thank God we got through that video. Anyway, do you think that the feudal system was a good one to use, or do you think it could have used something else, such as communism? Anyway, as well as this, I'd like you to put in the comments what you'd like to see in a lore video. Whatever subject you want, I'm happy to make it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.